Hey, I'm your host, Scott Dr. Jakes Goldfine, welcoming you to another episode of Where'd You Get Your Funk From? Shout out to PTFI for the funky theme music. For this episode, I'm delighted to welcome funk and soul singer-songwriter Linda Shider, wife of the late, great Parliament-Funkadelic singer-guitarist Garry Shider, and mother of P-Funk musician Garrett Shider. She provided vocals to several P-Funk albums and performed with the group, and has also participated in many other projects. Linda, thank you for being here. How's everything?
Oh, everything's good. Can't complain. Like you said, nice to meet you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. Was looking forward to it.
Hey, no problem.
Where are you today? And I assume you're at home, but what do you call home these days?
Yes, well, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. That's my residence. I've been here since February. Moved here from Maryland, which is kind of home, and I've been there twice last month for different things. Kind of feeling kind of homesick, but I'm adjusting, getting used to the new place and new surroundings and the weather and all that goes with it.
Well, you have a winning football team there at least.
Oh yeah, Kansas. The Chiefs are the gods here, and Taylor Swift would probably be number two.
Yeah.
They are serious about the Chiefs.
Well, you have your Chiefs red hat on, it looks like, so you're all set.
I saw them play yesterday. They did pretty. They're looking pretty good once again.
Yeah, unbeatable, it looks like.
We'll see.
Well, thank you for being here, Linda. I've been looking forward to this. And, you know, uh, the show starts off with the title, which is Where'd You Get Your Funk From? And so that's an initial question. That's sort of like a 30,000 foot view, if you will, just to, get us going of,
Okay.
where'd you get your funk from in terms of, how did you first get exposed to the music? And where'd you get your funk from in terms of, your tenacity and your character?
Well, I think the I Want to Testify was my first exposure to Parliament-Funkadelic. And, I just like, I would be in my room and I'd be playing it and I'd be like, yeah, I'm testifying. It just kind of got to me. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd ever meet those guys. So, just through, good fortune and timing, which is sometimes is everything, I did and was able to write and produce girl group in Paulette, their first single, a couple of songs that end on the P-Funk albums, a single for Garry. And, just like working with other groups, like you said, in my own group in Atlanta called Legs, we did a whole bunch of stuff down there and had a pretty good following. Put a couple of songs out as well.
Mhm. And what about in terms of, the funk attitude and what funk has, brought to your character?
Well, to me, I always say in any interview I've ever done, because it's true, they always reminded me of the Black Rolling Stones, of the Rolling Stones or the Black Rolling Stones. And so to be involved with somebody, and I was a really rock and roll fanatic. I loved the Stones and Zeppelin and all those kind of guys, Billy Squire, all that era was like I said, those were my kind of music songs to listen to, and P-Funk because they were so rock and roll oriented to me. So to actually become a part of that and to be able to contribute to it was like, my wildest dreams come true.
Did you sing as a kid? I mean, did you think that
Yeah.
you would go
From
in
the
that
time I was
direction?
like 3 years old, my mom had me doing talent shows where I did this I'm a little teapot thing. And after by the time I was like 5, I was sick of it. And I said, Mom, one guy went on ahead of me at one talent show and played piano. And I said, Mom, I think I want to try playing piano now. I don't want to do this anymore. And so she got me into taking music lessons, piano lessons. And, from then on, like I said, about 10 years old, I was putting girl groups together in the neighborhood. Of course, nobody had any idea how to get in touch with Motown or anything like that was going on at the time to get us going into the serious thing. We were just like novices, and it just came and went, and that's what happened.
You grew
By
up
the
in the
time I was a teenager, I was kind of like working with guys doing like little like maybe a office party gig or something like that. And so, I just spent a lot of time just kind of keeping my chops up on the piano and writing songs. first I started doing like lyrics and poems and stuff. I was doing my poet thing, and that kind of transgressed into doing lyrics for songs and melodies for songs. Kind of a transgression.
You grew up in the Baltimore area?
No, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I moved to Maryland, well, actually DC first, and then to Maryland when I was 16, just before my senior year in high school.
Okay.
And when Gary and I got married, we ended up living in Atlanta for 20 some years, I guess, before we came back to Maryland once my mom passed and I had to deal with her estate and sell her house and all that. Had the kids in school again, so we decided to stay. That's how we ended up back in Maryland.
Do you remember the first concert you saw that kind of blew you away that, you were like, wow?
Oh, the first, geez, my very first concert, I think, was probably when I was a teenager in high school, and the Motown Review came through Columbus, Ohio, and that was a big deal to us because we didn't have a lot of music local going on. So when something like that came through, the whole city would kind of like show up. My first P-Funk show, I think, was probably maybe in Richmond before Gary and I even got together. He had joined the group by then. Oh, no, that's wrong. I have to back up a little bit. I actually saw them before Gary joined when I first met George and Bootsy and all those guys in California. They were doing their first California tour, and I was staying with someone that was a friend of Bernie's, an ex-girlfriend of Bernie's, and they were staying at her place as well. And so we took them to some of the shows. So I actually got to see them for the first time. And this P-Funk was Harold Bean, Bootsy, and Catfish Collins, Tyrone Lampkin on drums. I think Ron Bukowski was probably still with him at the time. So this was before it kind of transgressed once again to a new group, because you see people will come and go in P-Funk quite frequently.
But what year do you think about it was that you first saw them?
Oh God, it must have been probably in the early 70s.
And so you knew Bernie's ex-girlfriend, or what was the exact thread that brought you into that circle?
Okay, it was quite by accident that I met them. My best friend from DC had moved to San Francisco, and I was a flight attendant at the time, and I came out to visit her for a while, and she had gotten married and was having kids. I was still single, so she said, "Linda, I have a friend that lives," actually she was in the suburbs too, in Oakland by then. She had moved to this, kind of doing the suburban housewife thing. She said, "If you want to enjoy San Francisco, hook up with my friend Vera in San Francisco." And so she called Vera and we talked. She said, "Well, Linda, you're welcome to come, but some of the P-Funk guys are coming out and going to be staying at my place. If you have no problem with that, you're welcome to come and hang out with us." And I was like, "Sure, I love them. I would love to meet them and hang out with you guys." So that's how I first got in contact with them. And once we did, we exchanged phone numbers. And so when they came to the DC area, they would call me, or sometimes they'd come and stay at my apartment when I was still flying. I give them the keys and they take care of things and, do whatever they were doing when I was gone. And it was cool. And we just kept in touch like that. And by then, Gary had come into the group. And I think I hadn't seen them perform in a while, but I know Gary was just, so I'm assuming Boogie was probably there by then as well. And Gary came over to my apartment one time to borrow some money from George. That was the first time I met him. The second time was when we had contacted them to do a show. I was working with a producer in DC, a company called Charisma Productions, and we had booked Weather Report to do a show, sold the show out, and they backed out at the last minute. So my boss asked me if I knew anybody that was in the area that might be able to fill in. I knew George and them were in Philly. I called him and he said they would come, and they did the show for us and kind of saved us. And so, like I said, we just kept in touch. That was like my second time seeing Gary. And by then I had a boyfriend, so we weren't really, trying to hook up or anything. So, we were just high and by kind of thing for a while. And eventually it just got to the point where one night, I guess it was just in the fate that my car wouldn't start. And my roommate had disappeared on me. So she had done some paperwork for Fred Wesley. And so she had disappeared on me because she was dating Rick Gardner, one of the Horny Horns. Disappeared on me. So I'm stuck with Garry and no car to get home on. So ended up spending the night with him, and it was on from then.
So this is like 75
We were
or
talking
6
like
or
76.
76.
76, yeah.
So how would you describe Garry back then, like when you first started getting to know him?
Oh, he was wild. He was young. He was very, I guess, ego-y and stuff. He knew he was a badass. A lot of women beating his door down and stuff. So he was kind of like, he was pretty intense. But he had this kind of softness that I saw, and I guess other people saw it too, where you could kind of get into in between all that rock star stuff and find the real person.
And he was already like star child and wearing the diaper at that point, right?
Yeah.
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 So what'd you make of that?
Well, the first time, this was the same Baltimore trip when we first hooked up. The Washington Post had come over to take a picture of him in the diaper. He asked me if I wanted to take a picture of him putting it on. And I said, no. I said, look, my mom will see the post. I'll never be able to explain this to her. And I think I'd rather not do that if you don't mind. And so he kind of laughed. He said, oh, she's so, oh, isn't it? He thought it was kind of cute. So, I mean, the diaper thing, I think George had done it once. And if I'm not mistaken, coming back, kind of thinking back, some of their costumes had gotten stolen. And so that was all that was available. And so Garry put the towel on, made a diaper out of it. And he decided he was going to go with it. And that became his thing. Hmm. Had to put something on. George would go on stage with nothing on, but Garry wasn't quite that bold. Hmm. Almost, not quite.
So, but how long did you know Garry before you became an item? And then how long before you got married?
Okay, we were together for like 2 years before we actually got married. And like I said, after that Baltimore encounter, that's when we first hooked up, and it became permanent from then on. We became a couple, and writing partners, and music partners, and partners. And that's how it started and went on for like 34 years. 32 years of marriage, 34 years as a couple.
Wow. Did you do anything in the funk mob related to any of their recordings before you were actually with Garry, or did it come after?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess, like I said, sometimes I would just be there and George would need some extra vocals and he'd say, Linda, going in the studio with everybody. And that's how I first started doing sessions with them. Just because I was there and, they needed some extra vocals.
So, and then you were Linda Brown, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The first song I did with them was 3 Blind Mice. That was my very first studio session.
Is that the Sir Nose Devoid of Funk record or actually 3 Blind Mice?
I think, I'm not sure what album that ended up going on. Seemed like it was before that. That might have been, sometime after Chocolate City and before One Nation. Somewhere in there somewhere. I'm not really sure what album that ended up going on, if at all. It seemed like it came out as a single. I'm just not sure.
Because the 3 Blind Mice I know is, what they sing on Sir Nose Devoid of Funk on the Funkadelic 1977.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know if that's what you.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, if that's what you saw, that must be what's happening. I'm not really sure. Like I said, seemed like it was before that, though. To me, I don't know. A couple of albums before that.
What'd you make of it when you first saw like a Mothership show?
Well, I had heard about it before I actually saw it, so I wasn't so super surprised. But I could tell from the audience response to it that it was a good moneymaker for them, and it really did. It put them up there. They were like knocking boots with the Rolling Stones as far as ticket sales with that mothership show. You look in Billboard, click your Billboard, and they were outselling the Rolling Stones with that show for a while. That's how much it caught the attention of the audience.
And when did you first go on stage with them?
I think that probably must have been in '76 as well. I had done a whole bunch of studio work, and one day Maceo Parker was like walking past me. He said, "You going on stage with us?" And I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Girl, get up here. You do all these sessions." And he just kind of pulled me up there and pushed me on the mic. And I was like, okay, well, nobody said I wasn't doing it. Nobody pushed me off of it. So I guess I was okay. Gave me a little confidence and I kept rolling. And then the second time was at Madison Square Garden because somebody in the audience was shooting and all the girls like Lynn and Dawn and Jeanette and Debbie, they went off stage and Garry said, okay, this is your chance. Go out there and take one of those mics. And so I did, and I ended up on Rock and Soul magazine because of that show. For some reason, they decided to put a picture of me in the magazine, which was kind of cool to me, of course, being a novice. But the more that people did that, the more comfortable I got, especially once I did my own group in Atlanta. And we did that. We did Legs for about a year and a half, and we were doing some pretty big shows, working with the Georgia Satellites, and sometimes Mother's Finest, we'd be opening up for them or different people like that. And so it gave me more confidence. So, by the time I was really in P-Funk, knew I could hang. I didn't want to go out there and embarrass myself or my husband. That's where I was at. So until I was cool, I was like, okay.
What year did you start with Legs? Linda, what year did you start with Legs?
That was probably like maybe 78 and probably like between 78 and maybe 83 we were working. Kind of think, no, it had to have been like a little bit later because our son Garrett was like at least 3. So say it was like said maybe mid 80s. I'll say like maybe 83 to 85, somewhere in that area. That sounds better. More like it.
I remember seeing a 12-inch single. Did you guys ever do a full album?
Yeah, we did. We had a whole bunch of stuff that we cut, but the guy that did that, put that 133 in, third out, put this LP out, he was somebody that we were looking at as possibly signing with him, but we didn't like the mix he did on the song, and he put it out anyway. So, he's been collecting on that. We're not getting a dime off of that. He was selling the vinyl for 140 a pop. We're not getting a penny of that. So, obviously we were on to something because it's selling and it's still on YouTube. We're trying to find another one that we did called Street Sounds. We're trying to put that one on YouTube too as well. Because we had some pretty nice stuff. Garry produced us. Most of the stuff was stuff that I wrote. Some of the guys had, different kind of, because like I said, they were kind of like more on the rock and roll genre as well, like I was at the time. So some of their stuff was more, we did like Black Sabbath, we did AC/DC, kind of, when we did covers, those kind of covers, Betty Davis Eyes, we did that one. We did some Fleetwood Mac. Let's see what else. So that's kind of like the cover stuff we did. And the originals of mine. And a couple of theirs as well. Some of the band guys putting some of their stuff in there too.
What inspired, did the fact that P-Funk kind of like went a little bit on hiatus in the early 80s kind of inspire you guys to do that, or were you doing it anyway?
Well, we were doing it anyway. In fact, Lodge Curry, bass player with P-Funk, he came down to Atlanta to do some recording with me on some of my stuff before he even got really seriously involved with the P-Funk group. And so, like I said, Garry and I, we just clicked. I have an idea. I'd get maybe the foundation. He would, knock it out the park for me, or vice versa. Sometimes it was me giving him melody and lyrics for his stuff, him giving me guitar for my stuff, and sometimes kind of like helping me figure out what I was trying to do and how to do it. He was really good at that kind of thing.
We all know that Garry was an amazing singer and a great guitar player, although
Yeah.
somewhat doesn't get enough credit probably for the guitar part of it. Um, but also, I've heard from so many people that he was like really supportive and encouraging musically, like in the studio, and
Oh
wasn't about
yeah.
an ego and all that. Can you
Yeah.
talk to us? Tell everyone maybe who doesn't know him, or even those that do know him somewhat, about his talent and his nature.
He would always say he was no better than his surroundings. And in the studio and on stage, he could figure out how to get the best out of somebody, especially new people that were like kind of like coming into the group and kind of fresh, kind of helping them to figure out where they could fit in and how they could contribute something worthwhile in the process. He never had an issue with somebody like trying to overshadow him, because he figured his talent would speak for itself. He didn't have to go head to head with Glenn or anybody else that would pop up, Junie and people that were popping into the group over the years, because he was very confident in himself. He knew what he was contributing and he knew how important it was, and figured. And sure enough, most of those people ended up fading to the background anyway, or going off to something else.
What do you think it was about him that allowed him to be such a mainstay for so long, with George and the whole thing?
He absolutely loved the funk. He loved it. He loved the people he was working with, especially the band people, because they were kind of like they didn't really like girls on stage with them. It was kind of George kind of pushed that on them, and they weren't really comfortable with it, but they got used to it eventually. But he loved working with Eddie and Glenn and Billy and those and Boogie, those guys. He loved it.
Hmm.
And so he wasn't really looking to be like, to go solo. He thought he should have gotten that shot, but he was just as cool not getting it, and just doing things with other people where he could shine.
And he became, like some people who didn't know better maybe thought sometimes that he was George Clinton, from afar because he was so prominent and so much of the visual representation of
Mm-hmm.
the funk mob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Well, he was the front guy who brought George on stage most of the nights that he did that, and pretty much held it down. He had a way of controlling the audience. And Garrett has kind of figured that out too. I did a show with him a few weeks ago in Maryland, and I kind of saw him kind of emulating his dad with that kind of thing, getting the audience to respond to certain things, and kind of getting the band to kind of follow his lead. I was really proud of him.
just remember, Gary just telling the crowd the way he would have the crowd in the palm of his hand and tell them to
Yeah, have to put
relax,
their finger on their head and all that
and
kind of stuff, and they would do it. Yeah, and Garrett kind of was in that kind of zone. I was like looking at him like, look at this dude. All right, your dad would be so proud of you, buddy.
yeah. Well, Gary, I mean, it's amazing how much he's ended up following in Gary's footsteps.
Yeah,
I
yeah, he's
mean,
blossomed. He's learned his craft well. He really has. I'm very proud of him.
how surprising is it because he was going off in his own direction and then he ended up pursuing that.
Well, he still has that in mind, but he needed income, and he had the opportunity to do this, and it's taken him into the area where he's been able to meet other people to do other things independently of George. It's kind of worked out for him. His goal eventually, of course, is to try to go solo, but he has to get the following.
Well, I got to tell you, I've been very impressed with his solo records. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really good, and not just
Mm-hmm.
mimicking like stuff, but having his own voice, in
His
my
own
opinion.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I kind of impressed with in him. You're not really kind of imitating your dad. You're using his feel to do your own thing. You've got your own sound, you've got your own voice and your own material, that your own vibe. So go with it. So eventually somebody's going to bite, hopefully.
Very good stuff. I've been really impressed with him, like I said. And so like the Gary that people didn't see in terms of his musicality, um, was he like often just like, pick up a guitar and just kind of noodle away, and did he rehearse much, that kind of thing?
He didn't really rehearse, especially unless it was a new song that he had to learn. But as far as like the regular show, he knew it inside and out. He didn't have to rehearse it. When he would play, like I said, in the hotels, like after the shows and stuff, if he was playing, he would be playing something original. Coming, he would be creating. He wouldn't be like, reliving the show like they just did. He'd be moving on to something else.
Was it ever talked about, or did you ever have any interest in being part of one of the girl groups, within P-Funk?
Uh, I was supposed to be in the Brides, but I kind of felt like I wasn't ready for it. That was the original. It was supposed to be me, Lynn, and Dawn. But I also kind of, Garry and I had we were still kind of fresh. And I didn't know if he was going to be comfortable with me out on the road by myself, because of what I had seen on the road myself, and I knew, what could possibly be going on. I didn't feel comfortable like putting our relationship on the line like that. I wasn't ready to do that.
Who are the
So it was
couple?
cool to write for them, and I did shows with Lynn and Dawn. So it was cool. I didn't really need that. I wasn't really That wasn't really where my head was at. I was looking more like trying to go solo myself, you know, with my own group. Especially when I put my group together, I thought we were going to be able to do something where that would be my group, and I was the only girl, so it would have been my shit.
Who are some of the performers or groups outside of P-Funk that you really admired,
Oh, just that I admired. Oh,
or that you aspired to try to emulate?
ooh, I always liked. Oh, when I first really started trying to develop my vocals, I used to listen to Jessica Cleese when she was with her Friends of Distinction. There was a song she did called Lady May, which I just felt was such an intense performance of hers, trying to emulate that. That was something that kind of got me into, like, when I would rehearse, those are the kind of songs I would listen to and try to emulate. Chaka Khan was another one. I used to love some of her stuff, trying to do her things. And Janis Joplin, because I had a soprano voice, but I was always trying to find that bottomy, bassy kind of lower key thing, that rock tone. And eventually I did find it, and I was able to finally. It took me a long time to figure out how to do that too, but I finally did it. And so that's the kind of stuff I used to listen to. I liked Carly Simon. I liked Joni Mitchell, Laura Nyro. Let me see who else. Some of the girl groups, like I said, when I was a kid, like the Ronettes and the Marvelettes and all those kind of girl groups. When I was trying to throw my little girls, those were the kind of songs we would be doing, working on. No.
Did you travel along on most of the like mid and late '70s tours that the P-Funk
Uh-huh.
did?
Actually through the till Garry passed away, pretty much. Unless, when my children were born, I'd have to come home for a while and stay, but I'd end up right back on the road. So from 76 through 20 2010.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go when they did some of their TV appearances and things like that?
Yep. Yep. One of
Where,
my favorite ones was we did 52nd and Park in New York, and it was almost like P-Funk Unplugged. And I've been trying to see if I haven't been able to find it online yet, but that was one of the best shows we ever did. It was the vibe was just so mellow and cool. I can't really describe it, but it was the show felt great. It was like a whole nother kind of vibe going on that day for us. And of course, maybe the Central Park gig we did, because I think they said it was like at least 150,000, 200,000 people in the audience that day. And we did Woodstock. I think we did that same week. That was kind of like awesome. The second Woodstock. I used to like the Montreux Jazz Festival. That was always a cool gig to do. The North Beach Jazz Festival, that one as well. A lot of the European shows were really fun.
how did things change for you on the road, from like the big shows, the stadium shows versus, later on like the 90s when it was smaller venues and
Well, it was always like that. We do big shows, and then we do theaters, or we do clubs. We do like the Regal in Chicago. We do the Howard Theater in DC. We do the Apollo, and then we'd end up like I said, doing Woodstock or something like that. It was just the gigs would just come. It was never really any like set kind of thing. Like we're only doing stadiums this year. Or, it was just whoever was paying, that's where we went.
back in the 70s, were the hotels nicer when the
No, no, they were awful. They were awful. There was one in, I think it was Shreveport, Louisiana, where it was just the whole area smelled of sulfur. Like there was a chemical plant so close by, and sometimes we'd be there for like several days, and it would just be like I would hate to come out of the room because that smell it was just everywhere. And there was like some that were just like, yeah, I hate to even like, describe some of the places that we stayed. And sometimes we just rather stay on the bus or stay on the van or something because the hotels were so rank. The so-called Chitlin circuit, I guess.
when how little was Garrett when he first got like brought on the stage or
Garrett walked on stage at the Capitol Center in Maryland when he was 3 years old. I was standing holding his hand next to him backstage, and all of a sudden he just snatched away and walked on the front of the stage with the big webcam, the giant camera sitting there with him in the face of it, and he stands up there. Everybody, raise your hand! Everybody, raise your hand! And just turned around and walked off the stage. And I was like, okay. George and everybody like were cracking up. They didn't know what to think. It was like, okay, excuse me.
wow. So he was ready, man. He
Uh-huh.
was born ready.
Yeah, he used to sit down when my band was rehearsing. He used to sit next to our drummer, and he would like look at him very intensely, and like he was like maybe, like I said, maybe 3 to 5, 6 maybe years old, and I thought he was going to be a drummer, but eventually he picked up the guitar and then went with that.
What was your impression of some of these cats when you first got to know them, like Bootsy, let's say?
They were kind of like, you had to like get to know everybody had their own little vibe, I have to say. It's kind of like you walk into the dressing room and everybody would be sizing you up and you're sizing them up. And some people might say something funny to make you laugh. Somebody might say something to maybe embarrass you or intimidate you. You never know what to expect. So you have to be on your game. Your gift of gab better be cool.
Who are the few in the whole entourage that you happen to, be closer to?
Oh, definitely Boogie, because he was like my little brother. Him and Garry they had been together since they were like kids. So he was like my little brother. Jerome Braley also, because we spent a lot of time hanging out with him, being so close since he lived in Richmond, Virginia, and we were in Maryland, which was like a 2 hour drive. And he would come up and he would do shows with us. He'd come up and record with Garry sometimes. Um, Dawn and I are pretty good, pretty cool. Dawn Silva and I, we've been off and on pretty good friends. Shirley Hayden from the Parlettes as well, I would say the same. Um, hmm. But that's pretty much it. Everybody else is like, they have their own little vibe and their own little clique. So, when we're on tour, we're like a family. When we're off tour, everybody's kind of doing their own thing.
Well, I know there's a contingency that's centered in that Baltimore area where you were living for a while. So, Mudbone and
Yeah, that's where the horns are from. All
yeah.
of them are from Baltimore. And of course, Benny's son is playing drums now. He's also still living in Baltimore. But like I said, everybody else is pretty much in Florida, California, New York, still kind of here and there.
What kind of relationship did you have, back in the heyday with George?
Oh, we've always been cool. First, he tried to be romantic, and I said, no, we could do business, but, I don't think that I want to be one of your girlfriends. So from then on, it was business.
Did you feel he was charismatic when you first kind of saw, how they
You could,
operated and
you could see that he could be kind of like intense. And, his energy was very intense. It took me a minute to be able to adjust to it. At first, I found him very intimidating, but eventually I got to know him as a person, and it was like, he was just another person, just another guy. He's George Clinton. He's got this star thing, but he's a cool. He's a person, like all the rest of us. He's got his good and bad points.
what is it about him that you think he had such a knack for bringing all those guys, including Gary, together like he did?
I think it was just the timing, and timing sometimes is everything, and that was always his strong suit, to get the right people together to get the music that he got out of it, and his contribution was normally melody or lyrics. But the heart and soul of the music that P Funk did was the band itself. It was the Garys and the Eddies and those guys. Bernie, that was those guys.
Did you get to know Bernie very well?
Oh yeah, like I said, Bernie is kind of how I got into. And I told Bernie when I first met him, I said, if you guys ever hire girls, I want to audition. I sure did tell him that.
If Gary was friendly with Jerome, did was he? Do you know if he was surprised when Jerome went off and did his own thing?
No, he wasn't. Jerome had already, we knew from being around him that he wasn't happy with things the way they were, and he was had the intention of doing what he did, going off and doing something on his own.
What can you tell us what it was like being present for one of those recording sessions?
It's kind of hard to say because it was historic to be there and be a part of this and be dealing with these badass musicians and vocalists and watching them create and being a part of the creation yourself. Even when, just at first I was just observing. Then when I got to actually be a part of it myself, it was like, oh, it was awesome. It's kind of hard to describe it, the feeling, to know that you're kind of making history in a way.
Would you find it surprising sometimes, how the record would sound when it came out and maybe you heard on the radio and you were like, I remember when we were doing that. And it's like,
Oh no, because we would listen. We always would listen to the playback, in case we needed to fix something, or, just to see, just so we could hear it before it actually went out to the public. We had that option to do that sometimes. Not all the time, but most of the time we could. We'd hear the final production before it actually hit the airwaves.
what was it like for you when you saw the, P-Funk Empire kind of crumble a little bit in the early 80s and that whole situation?
Oh, it was rough when George did the bankruptcy and we had to lay off for so long. I was working at regular jobs. Garry was working regular jobs. We were getting evicted from places, and it was just it was really rough for quite a while. But then Atomic Dog hit, and they kind of brought everything back to Gravy Train again.
Were you around when they were making that? Because,
Oh,
the story
sure.
goes that
I
Garry
wasn't
was the one that kind of put together and then
I
George just
wasn't
kind
in
of,
the studio when they did it, but of course I was in Atlanta. I think I had just had Marshall when they did that. Our youngest son, Marshall, had just been born when they did Atomic Dog. And that's why I wasn't there. I hate that I missed that session. That
I
was
think you're a
embarrassing.
man's best friend though, right? And some of those.
Yeah, almost just about everything. Atomic Dog was one I missed, but just about everything else that came through between, like I said, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, I had something to do with it.
Yeah. P-Funk All-Stars,
Mm-hmm.
George Recker's Tack Heads.
Boosie's, Boosie's Sweatband, Bernie's All the Wool in the World, his album.
Yeah, even later Bootsy like P University in
Mm-hmm.
the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
How would that work? Like, would Bootsy just say, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'd like you to come lay your thing down"?
Yeah, we'd be in maybe a studio, United Sound, especially, of course, where most of the hits were done. We might be in Studio A, and when we finished that particular song, he asked us to come in and do something on his songs.
And how would Bootsy and or George kind of tell you what they really wanted in terms of the sound or the background vocals to be on the track?
They would just kind of like lay. Normally, Garry would lay the background vocals down. He'd lay a track down and tell us to listen to it and try to duplicate it, or put some harmony on it, or both. George would usually give us kind of like, he would also kind of do the same thing. Tell us, the feel that he wanted, or whatever lyrics he was trying to get us to do, and he'd give us some kind of a guideline of how he wanted it done. And like I said, sometimes they would just do a track so we could listen to it, and then we just duplicate it.
Did you make the trip to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when that went down?
Oh yeah, sure did. It was really cool. We got a chance to, like, me, Garry, and Bernie got a chance to hang out with Stephen Stills and his family, and all his family is very musical, like Garry's family is. And so, like we said, we spent the night kind of like playing and vibing with them, with Stephen Stills and his crew. That was really awesome, because I used to love Crosby, Stills and Nash. I used to do one of their songs, and I definitely loved his first album, so his first solo album. The song to a Flame, I still play it. I love that song. So it was kind of cool to be able to hang out with somebody that you really had impressed me over the years with his music.
Who were some of Gary's musicians that he kind of looked up to? Do you think
He really didn't look up to anybody.
that he liked, that he enjoyed? You know,
Okay, I say he liked. Okay, he liked BB King. he had a lot of respect for BB King. I would say Eddie, Jimi Hendrix. I would say as well. I can't think of too many other people that he was very impressed with because he thought he was a badass on his own right, you know. So he wasn't really impressed with too many other people.
Fair enough. He was a badass. Was there anything that would like kind of irritate him about a show or?
if if the people in the group were not doing their best, he would get frustrated. He said if he didn't feel that camaraderie, that vibe, and somebody was like off or maybe too high that night or something, that would bother him, and he would probably speak on it eventually that night after the show and put him on blast.
Yeah, was he outspoken that way, or would he sometimes
Yeah,
just
he'd
kind of?
even do that with George sometime. If George was like too high or acting, kind of being uncomfortable, he would say something to him. If he was, he just was that. He was like that. He was a perfectionist, and he couldn't stand people that weren't on that same vibe. Do your best. If your best isn't good enough and you did your best, that's one thing. But if you're just out there BSing, he wasn't feeling that on any level.
Did you get to go to any of the movie sets when they were doing stuff like that, or
Oh no, no, no! I did. We did one. I remember doing one video. Reggie Hudlin was the one directing it, but when they did like PCU and I forget the other one they did. Oh, no, I wasn't there for either of those. But on the same token, I was in Atlanta doing a whole bunch of movies and TV shows myself, on my own.
yeah? But tell us some of those highlights.
Oh man, I was like the first one I did was called Stars and Bars with Daniel Day-Lewis, his first American movie. I did RoboCop. I did one with Hulk Hogan, No Holds Barred. I did a couple of In the Heat of the Night segments. I did a play that we did in Atlanta, and then we took it to New York for a few weeks. All kind of commercials, Sears, Delta. Let me see.
All musical or other things?
Just as an actress,
Oh, okay.
just my face, just coming on, doing that kind of thing, like working as an extra.
Okay.
But say with the plays, that was a whole nother thing, and I did a made for video kind of drama thing that was just on local Atlanta TV, public television or something. I did a whole bunch. I did about 30 different movies, and I can't remember how many apps, commercials, and all kind of stuff. My agent, she kept me rolling. She kept me busy.
Hmm. And what else did you do musically, Linda, besides Legs? I know you had that record that came out with Garry, like 2017, I think it came out, A Tale of Two Funkies.
Oh, A Tale of Two Funkies. Oh, like I said, well, that's one thing. Gary and I, over the years, we recorded a whole bunch of music, but it's on formats that are outdated now. So it's kind of difficult to figure out what to do with it. They're either on like reels or ADATs. A lot of the mixes are on cassettes. So it's kind of hard to like transfer it to like, a digital format to put it out now. So the ones that I put out on A Tale of Two Funkies were the only ones that I was for sure I could do that with. And I have some other ones too, but the interest didn't seem to be very excited about that. It kind of gave me pause about doing it again because we didn't sell that many.
Mhm.
And I figured like people would like to hear some of the stuff that Gary didn't get a chance to release, some of his stuff, the hidden gems, I guess you would call it. And I can't say that the response was very beneficial.
Hmm. That's the shame.
Yeah, I felt the same way. And like I said, so that now with all these other I know I have hundreds of cassettes of songs that we did. Me together by ourselves. But just have to listen to them I have one little cassette player. I can listen to them on cassette, and that's about it.
How would you and Garry work together most of the time?
Well, most of the time, I would come up with some kind of musical thing, or I had a whole idea, or he would come up with something musical, and I would come up with the melody and the lyrics. With my stuff, my own stuff, I would come up first of all, I would come up with the music part, and like I said, then do the melody and lyrics. He was not a lyricist, and so his stuff normally needed that kind of assistance. With me, I just needed his guitar to finish my stuff. It was like we were partners. We worked together.
Did he always compose on guitar, or did he ever use a
No, he
keyboard?
did keyboards too. He did keyboards and guitar and bass.
And I think his tastes and interests were more diverse than some might believe, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was okay. First, his very original roots were gospel, of course, with his dad's group. But he listened to who was his? He would listen to like, think, like the Undisputed Truth. I think was one of the groups he listened to. Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think he listened to not so much them, maybe, but trying to think who else did he like to listen to. Kate Bush, Prince, of course. I think he liked some of Prince's stuff. Can't think about the rock and roll guys. He liked maybe Eric Clapton. No, that was more like my kind of feel. I used to like Eric Clapton stuff. He was, like I said, he was just kind of, his tastes were very eclectic. Trying to think of some of the stuff that he would listen to, but most of the time he was listening to P-Funk stuff.
Do you have any idea what maybe his few favorite P-Funk songs were to like perform? Or I mean,
Well, I know Cosmic Slot was definitely one. He liked doing Miss Lucifer's Love. He liked doing Super Stupid. One Nation. I think most of those were probably his favorites, more so.
I remember when I met Garry when they were staying in Hollywood back in like '89, and I didn't get to talk to him much, but he was cool to me. But he was impressed or surprised or amused that I knew the Cosmic Slop knock to like get into the Hollywood hotel, So that was fun. That was fun times. Did
Yeah,
you
I forgot about the knock. Yeah, it got to the point where everybody knew it, so it didn't work anymore. It kind of got overused.
and then also the fake names on the registrations, funny names. Yeah. Did you ever go to any of the Letterman tapings or?
No, not just Letterman. Nope. I went to Arsenio Hall, and let's see. I didn't do either the Saturday Night Live ones. I didn't get to those. Nah, just Arsenio Hall that I remember.
Did you ever get to meet Prince?
Oh, sure, a couple of times. And one of my friends was married to Alan Leeds, who was president of Crazy Park. So when where they were on tour, I hadn't seen her since college, and we got the chance to reconnect. So I met him and Sheila E. and everybody a few times. First at the Beverly Theater, that's when I met Prince the first time, and then we got a chance. Me and Garry went to a couple of his shows, and went back, to the hotel and to hang out with my friend Gwen and Alan and different people.
I was
And
at the
Gary and Jerome did a song for Prince's sister Tyka.
I was at that Beverly Theater show too. Not backstage, huh? Awesome show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, is there anyone else that you've gotten to meet that was kind of a thrill for you, or maybe you were a little intimidated, or?
Ooh. Oh, let's see. Well, like I said, I got to meet Jay-Z when we did the Grammys with the Chili Peppers, and he was very pleasant. I have to say, I didn't care for Beyonce because she kind of like came off really kind of funky with me. We were all in this rehearsal place where everybody was rehearsing for the show, and I saw this little Yorkie puppy running around by himself, and I said, "Does anybody?" And I picked him up because I thought somebody was going to step on it. All these big guys and the big feet, and everybody was kind of busy. So I said, "Anybody know whose dog this is?" And so she walks up to me, snatches the dog out of my hand, never said thank you or anything. And I looked at her like I thought it was so rude. From then on, I was not a fan.
Well,
I thought that was just really nasty. I mean, like I said, I'm doing you a favor. Could at least say thank you or something. She just snatched the dog and turned around and walked off. I was like, well, excuse me, Miss Thing. Yeesh.
Linda, what's one or two of the most unforgettable experiences out on the road with P-Funk that you're just like, I can't believe that happened, or?
It's hard to say because there were so many. I have to say maybe when we were in the mountains, the Sierra Madres, the Sierra whatever's, and we got a chance to kind of crawl around into. We pulled over and everybody was walking, climbing up and down and enjoying the beauty of the area.
In California? Sierra Nevada?
Sierra Madres? What is
Sierra Nevada mountains?
Yeah, those. And the Grand Canyon, we got the chance to once again do the same kind of thing at the Grand Canyon. We used to just, many things. It's kind of hard to zero in anything specific because it was just so much fun and so exciting. We were just doing such cool stuff.
What was it like being on that bus?
Oh, the bus used to be fun. We'd be playing cards. We'd be writing music. We'd be singing. We'd be jugging at each other, teasing each other. It was fun. It was always fun.
What can you tell people, knowing him as well as you did? What would characterize Boogie?
Boogie was he was like a mix. He was always doing something kind of abstract. He would kind of present himself as kind of strange to people sometimes. He could be very charming. He could be very silly. He could have you cracking up laughing sometime, and then sometime you want to break him in two. He used to be, like I said, he used to come and stay with us sometime for months. So he, like I said, he was just like part of the family.
He was kind of Prince-like, wasn't he? In that he was so compact and he could play so many instruments, and he was just such a great talent.
Yeah, not quite I wouldn't compare him to Prince. Boogie could play guitar just as well as bass, but he would just mess with George. This was his way of getting on George's nerves or getting on his back. He would say, "You're not paying me enough to play my guitar, so you get my bass. When you want to pay me for the guitar, then we'll talk." And George, of course, being ornery, was not going to go for that. So Boogie pretty much never played guitar on stage, except maybe one time where it was just the music was killing him and he couldn't stand it and he'd have to plug in and do something, you know.
Hmm.
But that wasn't very often.
And what about Eddie? What experience did you have with him?
Eddie he was a lot of fun. Eddie had a very great personality. He could keep you laughing. He was a very, very nice person. Very pleasant, fun to be around.
I find that a lot of people don't realize that he could sing like he did, you know.
Oh
They think
yeah.
only of the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Eddie was so he was one of a kind as well. And left us way too soon.
Yeah. Um, what's one or two of the P-Funk recordings that you're on that you are the most proud of?
It's kind of hard to say because I did so many. Maybe the ones where it wasn't like a big group, it was just maybe more intimate. That would be Bulletproof. It would be who says a rock band can't play funk. Those kind of because those sessions were kind of like more intimate. So I got a little bit more chance to like be heard. Let's see. It's kind of hard to say, you know. Like I said, because you know I did so many of those sessions. It's really hard to like pinpoint any special something.
Well, those two, when I listen to them now, I'm gonna definitely think of you.
Okay.
Yeah. Two of my favorites, especially Who Says a Funk Band Can't Play Rock. That was just such a great track. Just love its message too, you know.
And that was me, Gary, and Pat Lewis. So yeah, so
If someone asked you, Linda, to describe funk and what it means to you, what would you say?
I would say it's the kind of music that you normally don't listen to unless you're really listening for something different. It has its own groove, it has its own history, its own just its own thing, you know. We say that the funk music is everything is on the one, starts on the one, not the two or the three. So if you can't in the 4/4 rhythm, you hit the first hit. It's going to be the very first note. It's going to be the very first note, and it's got to be a funky note to keep the rest of it going like that. That's where you start, and how it ends up is how you end up.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know where it's going to end up until it's there. It's kind of hard to describe, you know.
It's felt.
It just is.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
When you first started getting in that scene, was there any point where you're like, good Lord, what did I get myself into? Or you just kind of went right with it?
I think when my very first session where I knew it was going to really, where I was actually supposed to be part of this session, where I was actually like, you know, the personnel person, you know, you have to be in the studio in like 5 minutes, Miss Linda, you know. And I called this guy I knew who was a shrink, and I told him, I said, I've been I'm getting ready to do a session with P Funk. And I said, I'm scared shitless. What should I do? He said, Linda, if you have that option, he said, what the fuck are you doing on the phone talking to me? Hang this damn phone up and get in there and get busy. You know you got this. I had to get that encouragement because I was like, oh God, what if I open up my mouth and nothing comes out? I was thinking all the worst case scenarios that could happen. But it worked out okay. He gave me the like, you know, are you crazy? Get your ass in there and get busy. That kind of thing. He gave me that kind of encouragement. He was a musician too, so he was like, shit, I wish I could be, you could be one calling me.
Mm. You must have been a little freaked out when you got on stage the first time and there was like tens of thousands of people.
Not really, because by then I was comfortable. I think maybe the first time, like I said, once I opened my mouth and I heard what came out of it and it was okay, I was fine. It was like the very first time. I didn't know what to expect. I was scared shitless, but I did it. I put my big girl panties on and I got busy.
Do you know if Garry was cool with doing things like that bop gun stunt, where he had to fly and things like
Oh
that on
yeah,
his
we
elaborate
did that
shows?
every night for months. I was the one that was freaking out. I'd be down there with my heart in my mouth until he came back down to earth. I did not like that, but he enjoyed it. He thought it was fun.
Mm. And there was never a snafu where he got stuck up
Well,
there or
one
anything?
time he got kind of stuck and they had to help him pull him down. But I didn't see that when somebody told me about it. I said, I'm glad I wasn't there that night because that probably would have been when I put my foot down and said, enough.
So where do you been up to more recently and where do you up to now? Are you still doing stuff or you just consider yourself
Well, I just
retired
did
or?
a show a couple of weeks ago. I haven't been on tour. I went on tour last time just before COVID in 2020 with the big old nasty Get Down. We went on tour. I went on tour with them for a few weeks. Um, I just did a comic book for Garry and I sold that. Most of those I had a publisher put a comic book out for me, which I sold of Garry doing this superhero thing as he's flying through the air because I felt like that was superhero status and he needed to get that kind of recognition. But other than that, I'm just painting, I'm making jewelry, I'm just doing stuff, trying to keep my brain working.
And trying out some of that KC barbecue?
Yeah, but I don't quite like the barbecue here. It's not like I thought it was, not like I heard it was. I had better barbecue myself in Maryland, in my opinion, but hey, maybe I just haven't found the right spot yet.
Hmm. Well, that's a little disappointing.
I've always heard about KC barbecue, but so far I have not been impressed.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to find out where the Chiefs are going. Maybe that's where the good barbecue is.
Well, I hope some kind of way some of that stuff that's not been released sees light of day, whether it's, stuff you and Garry did or stuff that maybe you did and or Garry with P-Funk that's still not released.
Oh yeah, because George has a lot of our stuff in his studio in Florida. And like I said, I've got so many cassettes in different formats and stuff that Garry and I did. But don't know. Most people don't have those kind of. Everybody's doing everything on computer now with Pro Tools and all those kind of like things. They don't have to do. They don't have to do the reel to reel and the 16 track and the 32 track and all that stuff. People are not doing that too much anymore.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way, hopefully,
Yeah,
somehow,
hopefully.
some way, you know. And then Garrett, hopefully we'll have another solo record come. Maybe you'll be a guest on it
Yeah, I
again.
think he is. I think he is. He is working on something, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
And
what I'm
both of
hearing.
his other projects, he put at least one of my songs on each one. So I'm like, okay, thanks for the love, dude.
Well, before we part, Linda, what's like the lasting impression you hope that fans out there have about Garry?
Well, the only thing I can really think of that's important to remember is how much he loved doing what he was doing. He loved the fans, he loved the music, he loved his bandmates. He loved making people feel good. If they didn't come out, if they didn't let the P-Funk show and they weren't satisfied, he knew something was wrong. And he wasn't going to have that. He's going to make sure that everybody in that place went out of there with a smile on their face and felt like they got funked. And funked well.
He accomplished that mission probably thousands of times.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Well, hey, so good to talk to you and so good to catch up on those memories and find out what you're doing
Yeah.
now and, just get to know you better.
Same here.
That looks like one of those anti-tour berets that you have on,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite eras for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Scott.
Okay. Take care of yourself.
Peace.
Bye. Funk. Yeah.